All right, so we're on chapter 31, coping when it counts. Appreciate you coming by, Hokey Pokey. We're so bombarded with information about how stress is bad for the interventions focus on getting rid of stressors and adding in more rest and relaxation. But what does that mean for the non-negotiable events that cause stress? How do you face the surge in stress as you walk into a job interview or an exam? How do we deal with those moments and stay on our game? When you are faced with a high pressure situation, all the wonderful research on how to relax and de-stress starts to feel less helpful. You cannot rush off to engage in a deep relaxation exercise as your exam begins, and vowing to be less a perfectionist as you enter the only job interview you've managed to get in months is not going to make you any less stressed. In these situations, what we really want are some clear tools for how to use the stress to help us to perform and even learn from that experience. We need to learn how to actively cope with the demands of these non-negotiable high-pressure situations. If there were times when stress works to our advantage in these high-pressure, short-term situations, and so the goal is not to eliminate that stress and stroll into the interviews relaxed as you feel at home on the sofa. Instead, the key is to use the benefits of pressure without letting it overwhelm you and have a detrimental effect on your performance. Alright, so mindset, your new relationship with stress. Research shows that how we think about stress affects how we perform under pressure. A shift from perceiving the stress response as a problem to viewing it as an asset that will help free us up, those individuals, to spend less energy trying to squash the feelings and instead focus on meeting whatever demands that they face. As a result, they tend to feel less worried about the stress, feel more confident, and perform better. This mindset shift can be the subtle difference between, despite how stressful it is, try your best, to, when you feel the signs of stress, channel that energy and enhance your focus to do your best. This is also evidence that doing this helps us to feel less exhausted by the stress. When we focus on our efforts purely on reducing stress in the build up to a big event, whatever it may be, we are reinforcing the misconception that stress is a problem to be solved. When you are trying to get somewhere and stress rears its head, take it with you. Let it help you to focus and energize and move with accuracy. You are built to perform under pressure, and that is exactly what you will do. Reminding yourself that this changes the meaning of those signs of stress that might otherwise be seen as symptoms of a problem. In fact, research shows that simply reminding someone that their performance improves under pressure improves their actual performance by 33%. Another 33. So, bad language. One way to change our mindset is in our use of language. The words that we use can be powerfully determine the meaning of the situation and our approach to it. Imagine you were a professional athlete, and just before you left the locker room to compete, your coach said, "You're about to blow it." Not only would your stress increase, but your subsequent thoughts are likely to sound like catastrophizing thoughts that turn that stress into something that feels like panic. Social media is awash with daily affirmations and quotes, some of which may happen to hit home if they reach the right person at the right time. But what difference can they make? Some of them focus on what to stop doing or sweeping statements about what to avoid in life. There's a big problem with focusing on affirmations on what not to do. We only have that one spotlight of attention, and when we focus on it, on what not to do, that leaves little room to focus on what we need to do for things to go well. Others focus on purely being positive. These can be uplifting, but only if you believe in them. Simply being told to stay positive or you're doing great is vague at best and offers no clear guidance on how to move through the challenges ahead of you. Dr. Dave Alfred is an elite performance coach who works with many of the world's top athletes, helping them to perform at their highest level under extreme and very public pressure. When he puts together affirmations for his athletes, he makes sure that those affirmations steer from sweeping absolutes and remain concrete and factual, something the player believes. They clearly define the key to the necessary mindset and remind them to keeping to the process will lead to improvement. When statements make it clear what needs to be focused on, they give us direction. Alfred suggests starting with a how-to statement, then vividly describe what happens when the process is right, and thirdly, conjuring up the emotional state that matches your intention. When stress is high and threatens to disrupt our concentration or ability to perform, we can prepare statements like those in advance to help us match our thoughts, feelings, and actions to our intentions. The type of demands you will face will change the type of statements that you need. The key is to keep them short, concrete, specific, and instructional, and for them to keep you in touch with the feelings of the process that you may have practiced before the event. Framing. Alright, so we have covered framing in other sections of this book, but is it also especially helpful here? Reframing is using the power of language or imagery to adjust the way you perceive a situation. You are not trying to convince yourself of anything that you don't believe could be true. You are simply trying to shift your frame of reference. Look at the things from a new perspective that can enable us to draw a new meaning from this experience and, in doing so, shift our emotional state. In this section on fear, we talked about reframing anxiety to excitement. In this case, we can reframe the sensations of stress to the feeling of determination or threat into challenge. Changing just these simple words transforms that meaning without telling any lies about the reality of the physical sensations that we face. With the latter words, we are choosing to embrace those feelings. With the former, we can find them adverse and push them away. Alright? So, focus. Just what I was speaking about too. In high stress situations, we tend to get tunnel vision. This is supposed to happen as it helps us to focus on what is most important, on the most important demands. But if the sensations of that stress feel overwhelming, there is something that we can do to allow the body to maintain a high output while calming the mind. Ongoing research into this suggests that choosing to shift that tunnel vision back to a more panoramic view calms the mind. This does not mean moving your head to look in all directions around you, but just allow your gaze to widen and to take in more of your surroundings. The visual system is part of that automatic nervous system. And so dilating your gaze in this way accesses circuits in your brain associated with stress and levels of alertness. Huberman describes how powerful techniques for getting more comfortable with higher levels of activation. We don't want the stress response to stop because we need it often in high pressure situations. We just want to get our minds with being more okay with it and raising our stress threshold. Failure. When the pressure is on, it is often because the stakes are high. We often believe that failure has the big implications. This makes sense. When failure is interpreted as a big threat, the brain often wants to focus on that threat to be sure that we want to avoid it. For those who tend to self-attack after any failure, big or small, any signs of potential failure will likely lead to a spike in the stress response. Alright, so we all have a limited capacity for attention, and when we need to perform under stressful conditions, we need to take full control of that spotlight and focus on what is going to help us face the challenge. To overcome that fear of failure in the moment and preoccupation with everything that could go wrong, we need to immerse ourselves in the narrow focus on the process, leaving no space for worrying thoughts about potential outcomes. This is where it can help to practice ahead of time, if it is possible given the situation, and building a familiarity with the process and how it feels to walk through it. You can prepare those guiding statements that will help you on what to focus on and what to expect if you need it on that day. If your process becomes a well-trodden path, you will get the chance to build trust in that process. Depending on the challenges that we face and the realities of failure, we can use that same skill of reframing to change our perception of failure. If you want to explore this subject with journaling, here are a few prompts to help guide you. How do you respond to your own failures? Do you deny them and quickly move on, forgetting that it ever happened? Do you immediately start on the self-attack, name-calling, and blaming something in your character? Or do you look outward and start blaming the world for making life so hard for you? If there is something that we don't get taught about enough, it is to cope with failure. When we believe that mistakes and setbacks are linked to who we are as a person and our self-worth, then even the smallest failures will trigger shame and the urge to give up, withdraw, hide away, and block out the excruciating feelings. This happens a lot for perfectionists. Alright, so there's a focus on being enough in the eyes of others and assuming that those demands nothing less than perfection. So, if I fail, then I am a failure. If I lose, then I am a loser. However small or temporary that setback may have been. But when we respond to failure without these global attacks on our personality, and instead focus on the specifics of the moment, holding our awareness that imperfection is an intrinsic part of our common humanity, the emotional result is different. Feeling guilty about an error in a judgment or a choice made allows us to be honest with ourselves about where we went wrong without feeling doomed to being a failure forever. It focuses on the specific behaviors rather than attacking us as a person. Crucially, you can still take accountability for your actions. Self-compassion is not letting yourself off the hook constantly. It is focusing on the specific mistake as an isolated event, so you are free to learn from it and shift direction back towards your values. This is the path to continuing to improve and moving on from mistakes. Shame, on the other hand, immobilizes and paralyzes us. Failure is always difficult and heightens our stress response. In times of stress, our negative core beliefs can become activated. We start to entertain thoughts like, I am a loser, I am a complete failure, I am worthless, I am nothing. Those thoughts and the shame that accompanies them are very powerful in making us feel completely alone and isolated. We buy into those thoughts as facts. We think that we are the only ones, and so we hide how we feel. But it turns out, among the 7 billion people on this earth, these sort of core beliefs are a part of a list of just 15 or 20 common negative core beliefs that are seen across the world. Essentially, this means that we are not the opposite of alone. As human beings, the need to feel worthy of love and to have a safe group in which we belong is all in us. When we feel shame around failure, we can feel as if it is our acceptance and therefore our survival is under threat. It is an all-consuming sensation that can stop us from trying to fix things because we believe that the problem is us rather than a specific behavior or choice. Where we are going out into the world and taking risks, making ourselves vulnerable to shame, We need the skills to manage that shame and move through it. We all need a safe space to return that allows us to learn from failure without our worthiness as a human being coming into question. Alright, so that place has to be our own mind. When someone we love is suffering, we show them kindness because we know that is what they need. When we take a fall, it is time to do that for ourselves. It is the surest way of ensuring that we get back up and move forward. But how do we become less hostile to ourselves and become instead the voice that we need to hear? Shame resilience. When we feel the shame in response to a failure, there's often a huge thought bias involved. We take one event, action, choice, or even a pattern of behavior, and we use it to shape a global statement about who we are and our worth as a person. This makes a judgment on the whole person, using only this specific information, neglecting every other layer of our strengths, weaknesses, and intentions. This is something that we wouldn't do to somebody that we love. If someone you love unconditionally made a mistake, you wouldn't want them to write themselves off as a person. You would want them to learn from the experience and move forward, making choices that we were more in line with who they want to be. You would still want the best for them, and so you would not subject them to a barrage of verbal abuse. Shame can be intense and extremely powerful. Here's a list of tips for building resilience to the shame associated with setbacks and failure. So be vigilant about your choice of I am statements that lead into these global attacks on your character and your worth as a person that feed and re-trigger the shame. When reflecting on what happened, stay very specific to the behaviors that you consider to be a mistake. One behavior or set of behaviors is not the whole you. Acknowledge that you are not alone in feeling this way. After a failure or a setback, it is normal for most humans to become vulnerable to the feelings of shame and to focus on the thoughts of self-loathing. These thoughts are seen across the world, but are not necessarily helpful or accurate. Acknowledge that this feeling, while painful and intense, is also temporary. We can use self-loathing skills to help us ride the wave of emotion. How would you speak to someone you love who was in this scenario? How would you show them that you love them while being honest and enabling them to be accountable for their actions? Talk to someone you know and trust. Concealing shame keeps it going. Sharing it helps us to recognize the common human experience of shame after failure. Good friends can also help us to stay accountable for our mistakes because we trust them to be honest with us while continuing to accept us throughout. What response to this situation most fits with the kind of person that you want to be? How would you move forward from now in a way that you would be proud and grateful for when you look back at this time? Chapter summary. How would we think about stress affects how we perform under pressure? Seeing stress as an asset that would help you enable you to spend less energy trying to squash these feelings and instead focus on the demands that you face. Keep performance affirmations and mantras focused on what to do rather than what not to do. Adjust your focus to adjust your levels of stress. Work on your relationship to failure and building shame resilience to help you deal with the high stress pressure situations. So chapter 32, the problem with I just want to be happy. In therapy, when we start to shine a light on the way forward and think about what we want, it is not uncommon to hear, I just want to be happy. But the idea of happiness has been hijacked over the years with an elusive fairy tale of constant pleasure and satisfaction with life. You don't have to look far on social media to come across a wave of posts telling you to be positive, Stay happy. Eliminate negativity from your life. So we are given the impression that happiness is the norm, and anything outside of that could be a mental health problem. We're also sold the idea that if we can achieve material wealth, happiness will arrive and stick around. But humans are not to be built to be in a constant happy state. We are built to respond to the challenges of survival. Emotions are a reflection of our physical state, our actions, beliefs, and what is going on around us. All of those things are constantly changing. Therefore, a normal state is one that constantly changes too. In his book, The Happiness Trap, Russ Harris explains how emotions are like the weather. They are constantly moving and changing, and sometimes predictability, and sometimes suddenly and unexpectedly. Emotions are always a part of the experience, but just like the weather, some moments are pleasant and others are hard to endure. At other times, there is nothing distinct enough for us to easily describe. When we recognize the nature of a human experience in this way, it becomes clear that anything being sold to us with the promise of happily ever after cannot live up to the promise if happy means the absence of any of the less pleasant emotions. We can live a happy and fulfilling life and still experience a full range of emotions that come along with being human. Buying into the idea that happiness means constant positivity can leave us believing that we have failed when we feel down. We feel like we are getting something wrong, or we feel afraid that we may have a mental health problem. Thinking in this way then makes that dark, cloudy day even darker. Sometimes we are not happy because we are human, and life is difficult a lot of the time. Things that bring us the most happiness in our lives bring much more than happy feelings. The best example is the people in our lives. Your family, who mean the world to you, may upset you the most when they get things wrong. Parents feel the profound sense of meaning in their roles and intense feeling of love and joy. But they also feel great pain and fear and shame at times too. So happy moments are just one flower in a very large bouquet. You cannot have one without the other. Emotions come as a whole bunch. Why meaning matters. Some people start therapy because they feel lost in life. They cannot put their finger on a specific problem, but they know that they don't feel right. It's hard to get excited about anything or apply themselves to tasks with any real energy or enthusiasm. Without a clear and specific problem, they find it hard to problem solve and work out which direction to take. It's not so much that they are struggling to achieve their goals, they are not sure which goals to set in the first place, and whether any of them feel worth it. In many cases, this is associated with a disconnect from core values. Life has pulled them away from what matters most to them. Working to get clarity on your value can do a number of things. It can give you a guide on the direction you want to head in, an idea of the types of goals that will be most fulfilling and purposeful. It can also help you to persevere through the painful points in life, and crucially, to remind yourself that even when times are hard, you are on the right path. So, what are values? Values are not the same as goals. A goal is a concrete, finite thing that you can work towards. Once you achieve it, that is the end point. Then you have to look for the next goal. A goal might be passing an exam, taking everything off your list, or running a personal best. Values are not a set of actions that can be completed. Values are a set of ideas about how you want to live your life, and the kind of person that you want to be, and the principles for what you want to stand for. If life was one complete journey, then the value would be the path that you choose to follow. The path never comes to an end. It is one possible way of making your journey, and living in line with your values is a conscious effort you make to always stay close to that path. The path is full of hurdles you want to jump over along the way. These are goals that you want to commit to when you choose this path. Some hurdles may be large, and you're not even sure if you can get over them. But you give it your best shot because staying on this path is so important to you. There are plenty of other paths with hurdles and challenges, but sticking to one of these and tackling whatever comes along the way gives all of those events and actions meaning and purpose. It is the intention of choosing this path that enables you to push through the barriers that you might not have ever tried otherwise. So you may want to work hard to pass lots of exams in your lifetime, because one of your values might be a lifelong learning and personal growth. Values are things that you do, the attitude you do them with, and why you choose to do them. They are not who you are and who you are not. They are not something that you have or become or achieve or complete. Sometimes we drift away from living in line with our values. That might be because life happens and we get pulled in different directions, or it can be because we don't have a clear sense of what our own values are. As we mature and develop throughout life, our values may change too. We develop independence and move away from home. We learn from the people that we encounter, learn more about the world, maybe have children, maybe don't. The list goes on. For all those reasons, it is a valuable practice to engage in regular evaluation of what matters most. That way, we can make a conscious decision to redirect if we need to and ensure that we stay close to that path so that life can be meaningful. When we don't have clarity on our values, we can set goals on what we think we should be doing. Others' expectations or guess that once we achieve that goal, we will finally be enough. We can finally relax and be happy with who we are. One major flaw with this is that it puts rigid parameters around the conditions in which you can be content and happy. It also places life satisfaction and happiness all in the future instead of now. So I'm not suggesting that you should never set yourself goals, but when you work towards something, it helps to be clear on why you are working towards it and to recognize all the good in life is not wanting at the end point of your goals, but in the process as we go through them along the way. Rather than hoping things are better in the future, what if life could be meaningful and purposeful now by living in line with what matters most to you? You'll still get to strive towards change and achievement with all your strength, but you are not waiting for a meaningful life. You already have it. Chapter summary. We're often sold the idea of happiness is the norm, and anything outside of that could be a mental health problem. Sometimes we are not happy because we are human and life is difficult. Things that make life worthwhile bring us more than just happy feelings. They bring us a mix of happiness, love, joy, fear, shame, and hurt sometimes too. Getting clarity on our personal values can guide us on setting goals that will bring us meaning and purpose. Keeping our values front and center helps us to persevere through painful points in life, knowing we are on the right path.